Recording I'm up.
There we go. Okay, cool. All right. So a relatively small group, but that's great. So we can hopefully field all questions that might come through. Guys, as we're going through, if you don't want to actually come, and take the camera off and speak about the questions or anything, feel free to just pop them in the chat. Got Mishka here, who actually has just had a beautiful baby girl, but has decided to spend some time with us here on a demo today. So we'll be fielding the questions and maybe interrupting me and just jumping in so that I can kind of answer them as we go through. Then we'll have that 15 minutes at the end to have a bit of a Q&A with Jen. So if you want to understand a bit more about what it's like to be a client, but also just generally kind of using a system for volunteer management overall, quite frankly. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of kick things off. So as a brief intro, I'm Ash. I'm one of the co-founders at Volunteero. We started Volunteero in 2020. And the purpose for doing so is that I'm a volunteer myself. I volunteer as a fundraiser. I volunteered at food banks, and I also volunteer as what's called a befriender, so like a buddy for an older person. Now, my experience as a volunteer has typically been more disjointed than I would have liked it to have been. I always felt like the onboarding process was painful, too much friction. And then once I was up and running, I didn't have one place to go to book shifts, manage my attendance at an event, log my feedback, manage expenses, and chat to other people like volunteers and my volunteer manager. And so, because I didn't have that one place to go, I felt that I wasn't doing as much as I could be doing. And actually, it eventually led to me leaving one of the organizations that I volunteered for. So, we started with an aim to solve that as a passion project, which kind of got a little bit out of hand. And here we are now. And we're a full service kind of volunteer management platform with clients across the UK, Europe, and also now branching into the US. So I'm going to dive in and show you the platform and we'll go from there. So I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, Mush, sorry, because I've changed the hosting, I've disabled the sharing, or at least I'm not able to share. Would you just you can just give me hosting back if you like. You can just go into um participants, and then you can just go to me, make me host.
Okay, let me just.
Sorry about that. I thought I was doing the smart thing by making you host, but mate, clearly not.
There we go.
All right, super stuff. Thanks, Mish. Right. Okie doke. So that is, I'm going to, do you see hopefully a screen with volunteer on the top left? Wonderful stuff. Okay, so the platform consists of two key elements. You have a management interface, which is like a web-based portal for yourself and any other team members that manage volunteers. On the other side, you have a volunteer app, okay, and that is for your volunteers, and it's both Android, Apple, and also a web-based app for those volunteers who maybe don't have a smartphone and want to use their iPad or their PC or something, okay? So we're going to start in the management platform, okay? And where it all starts is actually advertising opportunities to volunteers on prospective volunteers on your website. So typically one of the challenges that we see is that you have a website where you want to post your opportunities. The problem is you'll have a website team who have a lot of other people asking them to do things. And therefore, if you ask them to do something, it joins the back of the queue and it takes some time to get done. So if you do want to make changes, well, with Volunteero, you can embed this public opportunities board onto your website. So that's done in 30 seconds by your website team. And from now on, you have total control over this section on your website. If you want to post a new opportunity, it's going to take you 30 seconds or so, and it'll be live, ready to go onto your website. And any changes that you need to make will be real time as well. The other great thing is, depending on your organization, if you have different locations where people can volunteer, then that is feasible and they can search and filter. If you have different type of skills that you might be looking for different roles, again, volunteers can filter based on, things like certain skill sets that they might have or be looking for. Now, as you can see, with these opportunities, you've got the basic information that you'd expect to see on a particular opportunity. And if you want to, you can simply hit apply as a volunteer, and it's going to open up a volunteer application form if my Wi-Fi wasn't playing up with me. So bear with me 1 second. I've been having some challenges today with our Wi-Fi. So as you can see, I'm really sorry for this, guys. I'm not sure why. Apologies, I must be having some issues, guys, with the browser on my side. But in essence, once they hit apply, they're going to open up a volunteer application form, which is built on Volunteero. Okay. God, right. I might just have to leave and come back in. I'm really sorry about this. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with my Wi-Fi.
I do think if you turn off your camera, it helps with the network connection.
That's a great idea, Tasha. I'll do so. 1 sec.
We did lose your sound though.
We got it, Ash, but we need your sound.
There we go. All right, we're in business now.
All sorted.
So thank you very much. So back to the opportunities board. Volunteers will find an opportunity that they are interested in and they will choose to apply. Now, what that's going to do is open up an application form that you've built in Volunteero. So let's go back and talk about how this is actually built. So this is our opportunity section. So think about this as like your adverts, okay? These can be built from scratch or duplicated from existing ones to save you time in building an opportunity. And they have everything that you'd expect them to see within them. Time requirements, description, benefits, locations, and the locations are geotagged as well, so volunteers can actually see how far away they are from them if they enable location services, okay? Then you just simply have to choose which application you're going to send them through. So with Volunteero, you can create numerous different application forms. Perhaps you have a number of different roles, and some of your roles require just the bare minimum information and you don't want to create too much friction for your volunteers. That's fine. But other roles might require a great deal of information and you want to capture that up front. It's fine. You can have as many different application forms as you like. Finally, you can add skills to particular opportunities and then just simply publish this to your search board and they're going to be live instantly. Now we're going to quickly talk about building forms in Volunteero. Now forms is really powerful in that it's not just application forms. It could also include things like having them sign waivers, health and safety forms, anything where they're essentially giving you information and it needs to be logged on their profile in the future. Use forms for this, okay? So let's have a look at a volunteer application form that we've built here. It's pretty standard. I won't go into the details hit too much because if you've ever built out any kind of form or something in Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, it's pretty similar stuff. You've got standard profile fields and custom questions. You can also do things like document uploads. You can have them agree to terms, conditions, policies, and things like that as well. What's more, where we go above and beyond at Volunteero is things like our reference collection feature. So if you have a role whereby it's quite sensitive, maybe they're dealing with vulnerable people or members of the community, and you need to collect either character references or parental consent, Volunteero has a feature that will do that for you. So if this is something that you need to do, Volunteero will probably save you around 45 minutes or so per applicant because no longer do you have to draft the email, send it, track it, chase them up, copy and paste their reference to another database or something like that. All of that is handled within Volunteero, okay? So we built our form our application form. Now, not only can this be linked to those opportunities on our website, but we can also just share it directly because we can pull out the custom URL and we can share this in Facebook groups. We can share this on other advertising platforms, but it just makes sure that we're bringing all of that volunteer data centralized into one place. Now, we're going to look at our submission section here, okay? So this is really where you're managing the applications that you're receiving, okay? So what you can see here is just a nice visual representation of where your applicants are in the process, okay? You can hover over them, you can see what status they're in, and you can also see any notes that were added. But if you'd like, you can open it up to see more details. So on the left-hand side, you've got all of the information that that applicant provided within their application. And on the right-hand side, you've got a few tools here to help you with your processing. So this first one here is the application status. This is essentially allowing the volunteer applicant to track the status of their application. Because if you think, when you apply somewhere, if you don't know what's going on, the chances are, you might completely forget about it, and then it just, you lose interest somewhat. So this is a way for the volunteers, actually, when they submit, they can subscribe to updates. And when you make changes here by either updating the status, updating the comments, or updating an estimated completion date, you can hit update, and the applicant is going to receive an automatic email notification to let them know the changes that you've made. So what we're seeing is that applicants are more likely to make it all the way through the onboarding process because they have some transparency of where they are in the process, okay? Now, the next section here is our process. This is your internal workflow. What are the steps that you need to take that applicant through before they're ready to become a volunteer for you? It might be interviews, background checks, training, those types of things. And it's just a very easy way to make sure you stay on top of those and nothing slips through the net, in short. Okay. And it also means that if you've got an entire team working on this, or a number of people, that it's, collaborative as well. Now, when I'm ready to onboard a particular volunteer, I hit create new volunteer. And as you will see, their profile is already made. All of the information they provided us on their application form is pre-filled into this profile creation. And we can then grant them access to the Volunteero app. Okay, so it's at this point that they're going to be invited to the app via an automatic email that essentially provides them with the download links to the app and their sign-in details, as well as some support information in case they have any trouble getting on. So what we've done now at this point is we've posted opportunities onto our website. We've taken in applications and we've managed them through a process and onboarded them onto the app. But once they're on the app, they're going to see certain things, and it just depends on what group we put them in. That's what's going to drive and dictate what they see. So let's take an example. So what are groups? They're essentially a way for you to ring fence your volunteers. So say, for example, you're a charity or a nonprofit that deals with older people, and you're helping support the older people in your community. Some of the volunteers might be doing like a telephone buddy service where they speak to volunteers speak to older people over the phone, and others might be working in your thrift shop, but some will do both. So groups is essentially a way to restrict what volunteers can see and do on the app. And it's also going to dictate which chat groups they become part of as well. So you'll see a bit more about this and how groups come into play in a little while. So what happens at this point is you've onboarded a volunteer and you've basically turned them from a submission into from an applicant into an actual Volunteer. This is our volunteer database, okay? And it is completely customizable. So every single staff administrator might want to see different information at a first glance, okay? And so they can customize their view just by simply dragging and dropping and revealing the different fields that they would like to see and where they would like to see them, okay? And so then you can filter and sort this information as well. So let me give you an example. One of the features that our clients were asking us for is they said, I'd love to be able to know whose birthday is coming up over the next couple of weeks in our volunteer force. Okay, cool. So we released just this morning a new field into this section, which is birthday countdown. So I might move birthday countdown to my second column here, and I can sort it to see which birthdays are coming up so that I can make sure I give them a phone call or drop them a message via the Volunteero chat just to say happy birthday. Okay. So yeah, very, very flexible tool that. Now, let's go into a volunteer profile just to briefly talk through some of the high level information. So here we go. I've got the basic information on my volunteer. I have tags, which are essentially just any kind of attribute that you want to tag to a profile to find very easily in the future. Okay. Could be completely different per organization, but you set these up and tag them to volunteers. So for example, it might be medical conditions, it might be language skills, it might be other types of skills that they've got. Tagging is a really easy way to find that. You've got badges. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail just yet about our badges feature, and you can ask Jen because she is the absolute expert when it comes to using our badges feature, but it's a really nice way to essentially reward and recognize your volunteers for certain milestones that you've hit, and we'll talk about them in a bit more detail in a second. You've got a qualifications section where you can log and track qualifications, training modules, certifications, everything like that, as well as the expiry dates. And the reason it's great to track them here is because you can very easily filter your volunteer list for those that have a qualification that's coming out of date in the near future, for example. Okay. And then the final key section I wanted to highlight in the volunteer profile here is any forms that they submitted are going to be linked to their profile here. This might be their initial application form. So if you ever need to dig that up, it's not stored in people's email inboxes on their, their hard drives or something like that. It's all stored on the volunteer profile. But also if they filled out, a health and safety waiver or something like that, it's all going to be on their profile if ever you need to dig it up for audit purposes. So that's a brief introduction there into our volunteer profiles, but you can also filter, for just about every attribute we would hope that you would need to filter for. So we've now onboarded our volunteers, but we then need to get them to start doing stuff for us. Okay. And that is something we call missions in essence. So missions can be anything that you can think of from, I'll give you a few examples. Watch this onboarding video and tell us that you've done it. Book into your shift at the thrift shop, match up with an older person that you'd like to speak to on the phone. In essence, we've yet to come across kind of any real use case that missions isn't able to cater to in some capacity. And we've built the features to try and make that happen. So because I can't obviously cover all bases for every type of nonprofit, in one fell swoop, I've tried to take a few examples that will really demonstrate the features that we have in the platform, hopefully so you can relate it to your own organization. Okay. So it starts with a mission template. So you're essentially going to structure the type of activity that the volunteer is going to do. So let's take an example of a thrift shop volunteer. Okay. So a volunteer that's going to be coming in and working in your thrift shop, firstly, are they going to need to come on site? Well, yes, they're going to have to turn up somewhere in person. Are we happy to basically cater to expense reimbursement for this type of activity for our volunteers? Again, Volunteero is very flexible. If you don't reimburse volunteers, fine, you just turn it off for all of your activities, no problem. And is there some kind of rota, so a recurring shift pattern that you need to build within this type of activity? And then finally, is there some sort of, activity that you want to bolster? So an example of this might be, we want Volunteero to keep an eye out if they haven't booked a shift within the last 2 weeks and give them a friendly nudge via a push notification. That's the type of thing that Volunteero can do, and it does it quite seamlessly. And the final thing here is volunteers submit short, snappy reports after they've done something for you, okay? So we're going to now talk about these reports. So what does a report template look like? So if you think that volunteer example where they've come into the thrift shop, they've given us 3 hours of their time, helped pack things, serve customers, that type of thing. Well, we probably want to get some information back from them. And at the bare minimum, it might be volunteering time, because that's a key metric that you have to provide to your managers, to the board of execs, whatever it might be, okay? But there might be other type of information you'd love to collect, but you never could do in the past, okay? So really, this is the point where the world is kind of your oyster. What would you like to know about your volunteers and their experience? So let's take a look at this example. Pop in our logo or any imagery that we want to put in. We might firstly ask, did they attend? Yes or no? And then if they did attend, how much time did you spend volunteering? Okay. How did you find your shift? Maybe you can start learning why people don't enjoy their shifts, or they really do enjoy their shifts, and you can make improvements accordingly. Maybe they got some cool pictures with their fellow volunteers while they were there, some selfies or something. And perhaps you're going to be the favorite of your content and media team now, because you can start gathering cool content for them to use on your social media and stuff. Honestly, there's so many cool things that you can do with this, but these are just a few examples. And then the final thing is around safeguarding. So did your volunteer have an issue they would like to flag to you? You can allow them to toggle on an issue, and this can drive an alert to the team to essentially say, a volunteer has flagged a concern or an issue, please address it. Okay. So that's just one example of a report that you can build. But as you can see, you've got so many different question types that you can build out any type of report that you want. And so you're going to have a richness in data that hopefully you'd have never had before now. So I've created a few examples of missions, but let's just take an event as a brief example here, some kind of fundraising event. We're going to pick our charity or our charity shop or whatever it might be. You can have volunteer limits. You can change priorities. And this is going to really just bump it up the feed of your volunteers in the app, just to try and get the most eyeballs on this possible. You can add a description. What is it they're going to be doing? How would you like them to use the app? Should they report back? That type of information, as well as resources like, links to your volunteer policy and things like that. If this is needing a location, as you can see, we're being asked for one, but it's automatically pulling it. You can override it to maybe be the local town hall or leisure centre or something like that. Next section, we're going to choose our dates. And this is something where there's not a shift pattern, so we can just pick specific one-off dates. And we can then choose which of our groups of volunteers we want to post this out to. So it might be regional groups of volunteers, it might be a specific group of corporate volunteers, or it might be a specific fundraising group or other type of group of volunteers, or we can just post it to everybody. Okay, it's completely very, very flexible for you. And then the final section of any mission creation is, do you want to require approval? Okay, so this is really so that you can essentially vet maybe who's coming in and asking to join a particular mission. Okay, so I've created a few examples already. This one is a thrift shop volunteer, and a key difference here is I've created a shift pattern. So you can create shifts, create recurrence, And so in a few seconds, you know, in sort of 30 seconds to a minute, you can have created all of your shifts for the rest of the year for your thrift shop, and volunteers are going to go and engage with it. A slightly different example of a type of activity is where there is an individual that you're matching a volunteer up for. So this is done by a number of different organizations, whether it be to, you know, go round and do the gardening of a neighbor, to make phone calls to an isolated individual, or to be a mentor or something like that as well. Okay, so I've created a few examples, and we're going to go onto the app in just a second and take a look at how they look as well. Okay, before I do, not only are we going to be publishing missions through the app, but we might also want to communicate with our volunteers. So if we've gone and published some new shifts and some new activities, maybe we want to just follow it up with some kind of communication. Now, previously, that would probably have been email, okay? And the challenge around email, as I'm sure most of you know, is email is cluttered with Domino's pizza offers and all sorts of other things that stop you being able to see the things that really matter, okay? And what research is showing is that push notifications are 45 times more likely now to be opened than an email. And so essentially, that's the reason we've gone down the approach that we've done, is we wanted to build you an instant messaging solution in your volunteer management platform. Okay, so it embeds in every type of feature that we've got on Volunteero, and it works seamlessly. So you can create a group chat, give it a name. So maybe it's our thrift shop volunteers. Cool. We're then going to choose the relevant group. And the great thing about this is, if you think about Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups or something like that, okay, one, they're not really secure from a data protection perspective because they all get each other's phone numbers and stuff. So it's not quite what it should be. But the other challenge is you always have to keep managing those groups, taking someone out, putting somebody in. Well, the great thing is you're already managing your volunteers and the groups they're in. Automatically, it's updating what chat groups and stuff they can be part of. And in our chat groups, news feeds, whatever it is you need to create, however you want to customize it, it's completely up to you. Okay. And so we're seeing a real boost in engagement and volunteers on the app as a result of this. Okay. So now it's time to go and actually have a look at the app. So I'm going to share a different screen now, and you will see, hopefully in just a second, what looks like a phone in front of you. Okay. So let's go to my profile section. So the key with the app is it's supposed to be really easy to use. Volunteers of all technical capabilities should have no problem using Volunteero, and we've really, really thoroughly tested that and worked on the usability. But a volunteer can manage their own profile information, and that's going to update your information on them as well. They can see the badges that they've received, and they can see the badges they can potentially achieve. So this is a way to maybe dangle that carrot out there. You know, it's like Duolingo, if anyone's ever done something like that. Oh, I'm just 1 hour away from getting my next badge. It might be enough to boost that engagement, okay? They can manage their own notification preferences. So choosing where they'd like app or email notifications, how frequent, they can get really granular about this. And for those of you who maybe have volunteering, which is extremely sensitive and they have access to sensitive information, they can even enable Face ID, biometric ID, things like that as well. Okay, so we've got lots of extra features here, which I just probably don't have time to go into in too much depth. But let's have a look at the missions. So this is where it's kind of like my window shopping. I'm a volunteer for my organization. I've got some extra time. I'd really like to get involved a bit more. Let's go here and let's search, filter accordingly and see what's available. So I can see firstly here at the bottom, I can go and pick up a few shifts at my local thrift shop. I've got all of the details that I need to know. I've got a link to my volunteer handbook. And at the bottom, I can see how far away this is from me as well. Okay, so it helps me know if this is something I'm interested in. I can go on and see which shifts are available. I can see the time of those shifts, how many volunteers are attending each shift, And this can just allow me to choose a number of shifts to join. And I can also add it to my own calendar because let's be honest, you know, that's where people manage most of their day-to-day life is in Outlook, Google, or Apple. Okay. Now, let's say I have attended one of those shifts. I've got directions by opening up my link to direct me. I then finish my time and it's time to log a quick, short, snappy report through the app. So let's just quickly do so. I did attend, found the shift. Okay. Any cool pics? No, not for now. Simple. And then what else I might add is, do I want to flag an issue? Do I want to submit an expense? So let's submit an expense just so you can see how easy the expense submission process is. Here it is. If I wanted to submit an expense, it's very straightforward for me to do so. Okay. Another example, this one maybe is not relevant to a lot of you, but let me just quickly show you. If there is something like mentoring or telephone buddies or digital buddies or anything where a volunteer is interacting with a specific individual, we also have the capability to allow them to make phone calls and things like that through the app. Really, really helpful and powerful tool. Okay. Now, probably the last couple of minutes before we'll have a quick chat and a Q&A with Jen and also answer any questions that you may have on the platform. But a couple of things I just want to finalize. If I go back into the management platform, here we go. Okay, so let's talk about oversight really quickly. Oversight, reporting, that kind of thing. So you can see who's coming along to your shifts, where you're missing people, who's going to be attending each given shift, and you can see all of that across your entire organization, for example. You can see who's specifically matched up onto a particular task or event or something, what reports were submitted. You can actually amend reports on behalf of a volunteer, you know, update them, all of that good stuff. And all of the reports are coming into this section here. And this is a wealth of data here for you because you've got people logging their time, how they're finding things, other data points that you want to collect from them. So you might want to either access this via our API or simply export some of your reports to Excel and start playing around with that data to try and extract some of that insight and value from there. If a volunteer has flagged an issue, you will notice that the report flag's red and you probably need to do something with this. And you can do so by assigning it to somebody or yourself, claiming it, and even going into the report and leaving comments and chatting with your fellow volunteer managers about what's being done to address that. Okay, so it's a real workflow management tool as well in that instance. You've got high level insights. Okay, so for example, my manager has come over and they said, how much volunteering time did our volunteers do last year? Cool, you're going to have that at your fingertips, ready to go. What about across a specific volunteering program like our telephone buddy program? Again, it's right there for you. Okay. That insights goes as far as engagement on the app, diversity breakdown, all of that type of stuff is here and readily accessible for you. And I think just to kind of wrap things up and just mention badges as well. I did mention badges and that we'll talk about it in a bit more detail. If you want to create some milestones, you can even add your own custom images and icons. So let's say we're trying to create a phone buddy pro badge. Okay. And we're going to say 10 hours on calls. Well, we want to automate that. I don't want to be sitting around and monitoring when my volunteers have hit 10 hours of calls with somebody or 10 hours in the thrift shop or something like that. And I can create as much granular level of automation around this as I need. So I know in the background, our volunteers are really excited and receiving these badges on an ongoing basis. You can set up things like single sign-on, set up different users, set up different roles to make sure everyone sees what they should see within the platform. And then I think very finally, our support team is second to none. There is no such thing as hitting a robot or something like that. It's genuine people on the line here. willing and able to help whenever you need them, as well as search articles, tutorials, and then all of our clients, Jen included here, help contribute to our roadmap. They tell us what we should build next because, quite frankly, we're not the experts, you are. So that's a lot of information, I know, to digest and to take in. So shall we just say, if we've got firstly 5 minutes to see if anyone has any burning questions about the platform as a whole before we dive into some Q&A with Jen? All right, no worries. Well, let's potentially kick off with some Q&A with Jen. So Jen, bear with me 1 second. I've got a few questions noted down that I'd like to ask. So Jen, would you mind by just kind of giving us a quick introduction to yourself, your organization, and a little bit about that volunteering program that you run?
Sure. So I am the volunteer coordinator for Rhode Island Blood Center. So we are the community blood center based in Rhode Island, but we also serve Connecticut and Massachusetts as well with blood drives. We're part of New York Blood Center Enterprises, which I know my colleague Phil is on here. He's also a part of our enterprise. He's in Minnesota. And Angela, who was here earlier, is another one of our my coworkers who is at another division in Maryland or Delaware. So and we're working on streamlining some stuff. So it's a great time to kind of chat about this. I was so happy they could join this and see a little bit about this platform. But I manage all of the volunteers for our program here in Rhode Island and Connecticut. We have about, and I'm just going to double check because now I can use my easy insights to see how many volunteers I have. We currently have 64 active volunteers, and they range in age from 18 up to 90. We have some really wonderful volunteers who've been with us for over 25 years and some who are just coming on board as they enter college, and we work with some college programs there. We have 3 basic types of volunteer roles here. So we have volunteer drivers, our cafe hosts, and then our admin volunteers. So the tags and the groups have been easy to help build out missions and support those different roles. So, and I've been in this role for about 2 years. But my background, I've been at the blood center for 13 years total. I was in our marrow donor blood stem cell program for 10 years before this. And so I've been overseeing volunteers for well over 20 years total.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Jen. That's super helpful. And so look, how were you managing volunteers before Volunteero, and were there any kind of key challenges that you were facing at that time?
So before we used Better Impact, that was the person who was in this role before me. We had a lot of transition during the pandemic. So one person left, someone kind of interim took that job, another person came in, and they left, then I came in. So there was a lot of confusion and changing of the guard over those couple of years. Just before the pandemic, everything was on spreadsheets done by email or actual snail mail. And then when our second interim person, the person before me, came in, she's a younger person. She is our resident youth. That's what we call her here in the office. She's only 25. So she got us onto a volunteer management platform. So we were using Better Impact. And it was definitely better than spreadsheets and all of that stuff. But I struggled with pieces of it not being quite as intuitive, not as easy to make changes as Volunteero is. I was struggling with being able to export certain things to get those insights and get those data points that I needed to kind of create custom reports. It was very static, and I found myself having to keep doing these workarounds in qualifications. If anybody else uses Better Impact, was trying to add things to toggle on so that these people would show up in a report, but then have to go back and then toggle off for everybody else. And it was very time consuming and frustrating. And their app wasn't as streamlined and easy to use as I wanted it to be.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful, Jen. Thank you. So I guess since moving to Volunteero, what has been the most, I guess, noticeable change from your perspective, since making that move?
So it has saved me a ton of time on various tasks. It's been able to take one of our most time consuming things, which is our volunteer drivers are reimbursed for their mileage expenses. So that used to entail having them fill out an Excel spreadsheet, email it to me or drop it off to me here. Then I had to go through, double check that it was correct with what they had entered. Now they just enter all of that into their report. They report their hours, they report their mileage right in that. At the end of the month, I can just download that report and send it off to our accounting. So that has saved me a ton of time. Scheduling is much easier in terms of our reoccurring roles. So our 6 donor centers across the states, those I have set up just for the year. I can put in the template of what days and times each center is open for, or what the shifts are. And that can be set up for out to infinity, set it up for just the year. So that has been very easy. The adding of the missions has been a lot easier than the previous system we've used. I feel it's quicker and easier. The tags are wonderful. That's something that has really helped me.
Super. And you mentioned, the volunteers kind of logging reports and stuff. I think one of the key concerns with a lot of people when they're bringing on a volunteer management system, especially when they hear the word app, is our volunteers won't engage, or then they're not into that, or we've got older volunteers. What's your experience been with that, Jen?
Well, as I mentioned before, I have volunteers in their late 80s and even a couple who are actually 90, and they've all been using it. So, we had a few people who were like, another thing, a different thing to learn. But we were able to go through it. And it's been a really easy adoption piece. There have been a few who've said like, oh, I'm just confused a little bit on this. It's different than what we were using before. And we've sat down and had kind of a one-on-one, and then they get it. So, and it makes me so happy the first time they send in their report. I'm like, yes, they got it. And the other really important piece of the report is that I have it set up for a free text, like you were showing, to say, is there anything you want to tell me about what happened at your shift? Is there anything? And we've been really able to gather some kind of boots on the ground feedback from people who we didn't always get that information from as it was happening. And that's stuff that I'm able to then share with our leadership team, and we're able to make changes much quicker and react to those ideas and suggestions and feedback.
Gotcha. No, that's really cool. No, I appreciate that. I guess Drew and Tasha, do you have any questions, and Phil, that you'd like to ask Jen? And it doesn't even have to just be specifically about Volunteero, but if you're interested in getting any kind of system, and you maybe don't have one in place at the moment, I'm sure Jen has got a wealth of experience she'd be happy to share.
Well, I don't really have any questions for Jen at this time, because I kind of have access to her time as a colleague at the blood center. Well, that's great. So I'll just keep my mouth shut. I think our challenges are in finding a management system is we're looking to try to do that across our enterprise.
Yeah.
And everybody's on something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and what works great for everybody. Certainly I'm impressed by what you had to offer today, and we're currently on Volgistics, which I'm sorry, my camera's not working today either. I'm working from home and don't know what's going on. Because I have the cutest dog who just climbed up on my lap, I have to say.
We're missing
but certainly I think there's challenges with every system.
Yeah.
Just making that jump to one and getting everybody to agree on something. I'm currently not, I certainly don't use Volgistics to its capacity, and I'm certainly not married to that system. So I'd probably be the easiest one to convince. But yeah, but I'll be quiet and let everybody else ask their questions.
Thank you, Phil. That's really helpful.
I'll convince Phil, and then he can help me convince everybody else.
There you go. It's the domino
Yeah,
effect.
right.
So Tasha, you're about to.
Yes, my name is Tasha Dyson, she, her, and I work for the Oklahoma City Zoo in Oklahoma. I'm the volunteer programs manager. I started in this role just over a year ago and created the program just over a year ago. So now we currently have just over 200 continuous volunteers. That's the first year of the program. So growth potential is definitely something that we're looking for. However, we are using Volgistics for our continuous volunteer program. I'm pretty comfortable in that system at this point. And the change management was quite an ordeal to get through. So what I'm more so looking for right now is a way to manage episodic volunteer opportunities. Last year, again, really our first year implementing the changes in this program, we had between 2,000 and 3,000 episodic volunteers.
Right.
So that is a combination of corporate groups that we have come out for single days of service, as well as special events. So we have one special event in the fall specifically that has between 700 and 1,200 volunteers come out to it. Currently, I'm managing those people through a bunch of automations I've created, the Microsoft Suite, as well as Sign Up Genius. And what are we doing? Sign Up Genius, Microsoft Suite, Excel, which is part of Microsoft. And I'm getting all of those apps to talk to each other to try to automate it as much as possible because I am a team of one. So I'm kind of interested in hearing more about the capabilities of the software with episodic volunteer opportunities. Specifically, I do like Sign Up Genius because it doesn't require a lot of steps. Somebody logs onto the website and it's very, very easy for them to follow through with signing up for a shift. But then I kind of lose their contact info unless I pull the Excel files and, you know, all of that. So I would like to hear more about that if possible.
Yeah, look, totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I am a big believer in transparency, quite frankly. And I think if I'm honest with you, Tasha, we're probably not the best for that. The reason being, and I'll be totally frank, is that the app is almost a barrier, and that barrier is actually a helpful thing for most nonprofits. But if you want that seamless ease of getting straight to booking a kind of booking a shift, kind of with little to no intervention from yourself, and then you can just see who's coming along. I just unfortunately at this stage don't think we're the ones for that, but I really would like to try and be able to cater to that in the future because it is something that seems to be quite a lot bigger in the US than it is in the UK, with those big influxes for one day of a corporate who come along with 500 people. So look, Tasha, we'll stay in touch, I think, separately to this, and I know Mishka's been speaking to you because things will change, as Jen I think will attest to. Things change very, very quickly with us here at Volunteero. And so when we're in a position where maybe we can cater to that a little bit more, we'd love to kind of help and reach out on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate
No, my
it.
pleasure. No worries. But yeah, I mean, look, we've got a few minutes left. If there's any other questions, I'm sure either I can answer anything or if you want to ask a question to Jen, otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Drew Delbar, pronouncing him from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I run the volunteer program for Fringe Theatre, so a large annual Fringe theatre festival that houses about 1,000 volunteers every August. And we're currently a Better Impact user, have been since I think 2017, before my time. I've been here since 2019. And definitely are feeling like we're needing to migrate to something that's more up in terms of with technology. I think Better Impact and Logistics, the two big players out there, are lagging behind in terms of design and user interface and and features and things like that. So anyways, we're currently into exploration phase of like, what do we move to and what do you switch to? But Jen, my question for you today is that because we have such a large volunteer program, we have a lot of volunteers who are also administrators of our platform. So they log into the admin side of Better Impact. They create the schedules. They send emails out to their volunteers. They do a lot of like the admin type tasks. except for the accepting of all the reviewing of applications, accepting of volunteers still lives with the staff department. But as soon as those volunteers are accepted, we basically pass them off to other team leader volunteers who do all the administration from that side. So I guess Jen or Ash, do either, like Jen, do you have any people in that position, that any administrators who are on the back end of Volunteero? And then Ash, I guess the question would be, is there any capabilities built in for like limited admin roles or sort of things for volunteers who you don't want them to see everything, but you want them to see like maybe one group of volunteers? Like, I only want you to see the you know, our beer tents volunteers, not our box office ones, for example. So. Oh, and you're on mute, Jen.
Sorry. I can say I don't currently use that. In the future, I hope to have at least one person who can take on that role. So I'll let Ash speak more about that, but I do believe that there is a way to do that within roles. I will say the team, when I was switching over, I worked with Josie. She was wonderful in answering questions and helped me figure out the best way to set things up. So I do think the role area there is something that you could use.
That's exactly right, Jen. Yeah, no, so to your, in answer to your question, Drew, so you saw earlier that there's groups. You can create group hierarchies as well. It's good. You can make it as complex or as simple as you need it to be. And then the way that our roles works, an administrator is given a role and then group restrictions. Now, the role is what limits what they can do in the system. So as you can imagine, they shouldn't be able to, even if they can see their beer tent volunteers, maybe you don't want them to be able to delete them completely or something like that. And they should be able to post shifts, but not do this. So that's what restricts them there. And then you sub-restrict them based on their groupings as well. So our kind of role and permission capabilities, Drew, would be able to cater, I think, to anything that you need.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you.
No worries. And then I guess one other example is that, Drew, we have other clients that do that where their volunteers become kind of administrators of the platform. And something that we do sometimes with the support side of things is we've created like what we call these pods, which are like these online resources custom for you guys, where you can literally just send this as almost like the onboarding and training kind of resource for those volunteer administrators. And most of the time they're actually able to get up and running and using the system effectively without too much into, you know, too much of your effort and things like that. So that, yeah. I think that's probably it then, guys, unless anybody else has any other questions. Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much, Jen, for your time. Really do appreciate it. And Drew, Tasha, Phil, thank you so much for attending and for your questions. And hopefully, I'm sure we'll stay in touch in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jen. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.